Okay, so let's look at the passive voice in German. The passive in German, in English, in most languages is used when we want to talk about the action that's expressed by our verb, when that action is really important to us and when it doesn't matter so much who it was that carried out the action or who's responsible for the action. Passive voice, passive, is not same as tense. So you can have passive sentences in lots of different tenses. Passive is not a tense. That's quite important to keep in mind. Let's look at some examples in English of the passive, first of all. If we look at this active sentence here, a shop sells German beer, we can transform that into a passive. German beer is sold by this small shop. And here's a picture of some beer to go with our sentences. Now we notice our verb form in the active, sells, is very different from our verb form in passive sentence, is sold. Now let's look at another one, and this time in the imperfect past tense. He paid the taxi driver is an active sentence. In passive, same sentence would be the taxi driver was paid by him. When we look at that sentence in German, we first of all notice our taxi has now changed appearance, but we also notice in the active we use a Präteritum, bezahlte den Taxifahrer. In the passive, our sentence changes to der Taxifahrer wurde von ihm bezahlt. And we use a passive here because really to us, and probably also to the taxi driver, it matters first of all that he or she was being paid. It doesn't really matter so much who paid him or her. Most important thing is that they were actually being paid, and that's what we use passives for. When it's the action that's most important, and whoever performed the action is only of secondary importance to us. Okay, so we've got an example of that here in German, in the imperfect or in the Präteritum tense. And when we look at the sentence, we notice that in order to make a passive in German, we need a form of werden. So, der Taxifahrer wurde bezahlt. Wurde is a form of werden. And with that form of werden, we combine a past participle of our main verb. So here we have der Taxifahrer wurde von ihm bezahlt, wurde being a form of werden, bezahlt being the past participle of our main verb, bezahlen. Here we've got a few examples of passive sentences in different tenses, and we notice each time our form of werden is different. So it's different in presence, it's different in the Präteritum, and it's also different in the perfect tense. So if you're not sure about your forms of werden, it really is crucial that you familiarize yourself with these forms because they're essential for making passives in German. Now, some of you might think, well, isn't there a form of the passive in German that uses sein? And if so, why do I need to bother with all these forms of werden? Well, first of all, yes, there is a form of the passive with sein. However, that form is quite rare in German, and we only use it in certain contexts and in certain circumstances, whereas the passive with werden is very, very frequent in German, and it actually can lead to misunderstandings if you get your forms of werden and your forms of sein mixed up when you're making a passive. So it really does pay to know your werdens from your seins when you're making passives in German.